Hey folks, this is Alan Jones with HiFi Chats and HiFi Buys. So I want to welcome y'all to HiFi Chats number 27. I am so pleased today to be able to get Mr. Andy Kerr, who is the Director of Product Marketing and Communication for Bowers Wilkins. This is one of the biggest speaker companies on the planet, and I'm really excited to be able to learn a little bit about Andy today. Andy, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
We appreciate it. I know you're a very busy guy, and I just can't tell you how thrilled I am to have you here. So,
yeah, well, it's going to be fun, right? I mean, we're going to be talking about what we do, and we enjoy what we do, so that's not going to be hard work.
Well, that is the thing about this business. Everybody in it's the same way, and we all kind of seem to have a lot of similar backgrounds and that kind of thing as well. So it's really interesting to see how all this has gone. So, again, thank you very much. I want to do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll kind of get moving into things. But shall we say, I want to ask everybody, if you will, to like and subscribe out there. It kind of keeps you abreast of what's going on, helps us with our Google search stuff. It's the honest answer, and so anyway, we'd appreciate your help in that. Also, if you want to go to hifibuys.com, we'll put a link up there in the chat so that you can go to the hifibuys.com and actually sign up for the newsletter. We'd appreciate it very much. Also want to encourage you to ask any questions kind of as we go through this, and as we get towards the end, we're going to make sure we cover as many questions as we have out there. And we also have a HiFi Chats playlist. So the 26 previous chats and this one will the music that gets discussed in it will go into that HiFi Chats playlist. And so it's really fun to. It's a very eclectic bunch of music because it's from all walks in this audio industry. So it's pretty awesome. So, Andy, are you ready to go?
Go for it.
All right. So. A brief view of kind of what we're going to do. We're going to talk to Andy a little bit about his personal self and learn a little bit about him and maybe some folks in his life that had a big effect on him, and learn a little bit about some of the music and that kind of thing, how he got into this industry and how he got on his path to BMW. And then we're going to get into some products. And in the middle of that, we're also going to have a little video from the factory as well. So I'm really excited about seeing that too, since I have not been there myself. But anyway, tell us a little bit about your family, where you grew up.
Oh, well, okay. So family's a mix. So my father is Scottish, which is where the name comes from. In fact, believe this or not, the history of my family goes back a very long time in Scotland. We are a clan. We have a tartan. We have all that kind of stuff. Kerr. We even have a castle, believe it or not. It's called Ferniehouse Castle. I don't clearly own that castle myself. Don't get the wrong impression. But yeah, it goes back a long time. So so that's that side. And then my mother's side of the family is from England. So I'm half and half, 50-50 Scottish English. And I live in the south coast of the UK. So my wife works down here as well, has her own very successful independent career. So we're here with a family. I have two boys who are now teenagers and eating me out of house and home, but that's what teenagers do, right? And yeah, I've been in the audio industry decades, and I mean decades. So I mean, if you go kind of when did I first get into this, it would probably be ridiculously young. I think my mother tells stories of me kind of listening to music and dancing in front of the TV when I was a little kid. I mean, like 4 or 5.
Yes.
And then I was buying singles. I was kind of pooling pocket money with my best friend at the time, Vince, and we were buying singles when we were really young, like 7, 8, 9, 10. So I had like a record collection early. Got into the music really early as a result. And at the time, you have to remember when that was contextually. That's the 70s. So I was buying punk and new wave and that kind of stuff, which is probably pretty advanced for my age, but there we go. And it kind of hooked from there, really. So it was kind of just a natural progression. I had a very fortunate kind of pivot point moment when I was 12, which probably changed and defined really everything. Up until that point, I was listening to singles on like just a stacked down set, that kind of thing where you'd kind of stick in 5 or 6 and then they kind of just drop, and and it was what it was. But when I was 12, very sadly for her, but a member of my family passed away and I received a small inheritance. And because I just literally lived for music, my other passion in life, by the way, apart from music, is cars and football, but we'll come to that later. Okay. But basically because I lived for music and I had like a decent music collection, I naturally did what any 12-year-old kid with the summer money would do, which is I bought my first HiFi. So I had like, a decent record player. I bought a Lin because that was the record player you bought. and then a Roton amplifier. And I'd love to be able to say a pair of Bowers Wilkins loudspeakers, but unfortunately that would be a lie. My first speakers were Missions. Mission 70 Freedoms, and that was my first system. But nonetheless, you know, clearly for the age, that's like a big deal. So and
Mission was making some pretty good. Mission was making some pretty good speakers back in that time. So
yeah, they were fun. They were rock and roll, man. They were like I wouldn't say they were the most accurate thing in the world,
right?
But they made everything exciting, and they were a great value as well.
So we're going to get a little bit further in your path to B&W and kind of in that area. I wanted to find out a little bit about some of your hobbies, which you had just kind of mentioned, automobiles and
soccer. I call it football. You'd call it soccer. So basically, yeah. I mean, outside. I mean, you know, I can't necessarily claim to be the most kind of modern man in the world. Maybe it's the kind of typical guy kind of interests. But yeah, I was. Outside of engineering in general, so you know, anything to do with a machine, anything to do with an engine in particular, it was cars. I was fascinated there by them from an early age, and still am, and still love them. And I've spent too much money on them over the years, but that's fine. That's all good. And so yeah,
that's what hobbies do.
Oh yeah. You know what I mean? They always say it's like it's a good way of separating somebody from their income, but at the same time, you know, if you meet a person that doesn't have a hobby, you kind of feel a bit suspicious. You know, surely someone somewhere always needs a hobby, just something, whatever that might be. And, you know, there are some pretty weird ones out there, right? But so there's that. And say the other thing was soccer. So, you know, when I was growing up, I grew up actually in the middle of the country, in a city, Nottingham, which I'm sure you will all know from Robin Hood and all that kind of stuff. And in the area when I was growing up, there was a very successful football team, Nottingham Forest, which became my passion. So I kind of wanted to follow them, watch them, and then I started playing, and then that became a pretty good thing. For a period of time, I was a reasonable player. I mean, a reasonable player. I never came to be a great player, but a reasonable player. And then when I kind of moved down here, started following the local team down here, Brighton and Hove Albion, which I still do now. So I go and see them on a regular basis. And my two sons are kind of grown up as mad fans for Brighton, so we go and see them. Obviously, not right now because of COVID and everything else, but normally that's what we would do on a weekend. So we're either playing it or we're watching it.
Well, that's awesome. Great thing to do with your sons.
Well, so far, yeah. I mean, you know, I'm sure at some point or another they get tired of it, right? But for the moment, they still seem to enjoy it and tolerate Dad kind of coming along and kind of kicking a ball with them occasionally and stuff like that. So yeah, good fun, right? So, and it's good as well because let's be honest, you know, a lot of what we do professionally is kind of fairly indoorsy, right? It's fairly sedentary. So doing some stuff that gets you out in the air and maybe get the heart rate up a bit and things like that, that's got to be a good thing.
Yep, I would agree. I try and get a little running when I can and play some tennis. But yeah. So life experiences, things that have had an impact on who you are.
Well, that for a start, I mean, that thing that I described to you earlier on when 12, you know, so acquiring the money to go and spend money on a record player very definitely shaped a future trajectory for me. I think, you know, I realized by age 12, you know, even though I was keen on playing soccer, I was never going to be a pro, you know, so that was a delusion kind of shattered early. So I wanted to get involved as best I could in the other things that I most loved. You know, I didn't fancy a career in, you know, I don't know, banking or, you know, something like that. I wanted to be professionally involved in the things that most interested me. So yeah, I kind of worked in music stores and then got a job in a hi-fi store. Then kind of went off to college, came back, did a little bit more of a time in music stores. And then a UK journalism publication, What HiFi, which I don't know, you guys might have heard of, was advertising for somebody to be basically their editorial assistant, which is fundamentally somebody who kind of helps kind of grease the wheels of the operation, you know, kind of organizing the photo shoots, getting the products in for the photographers to take the shots, getting things set up for the reviewers to do their review work, that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And I applied for that job. And that was kind of like, if it wasn't already, you know, because obviously working in a hi-fi store, you get a ton of hands-on experience, but that was like a really great education curve because you just spend literally time just surrounded by hundreds of new pieces of componentry each year.
Yep.
So I had like a home crash course. I was taking stuff home like every weekend to try it out, trying dozens of different brands, trying out their stuff. way
That
beyond my
was what
pay
I did.
grade.
I bought and sold a whole bunch of used gear and was able to take a whole bunch of that home and actually bought and sold out of my house before I did the store. And then when we opened the store, it was only used gear for the first year or so. And
Uh-huh.
but that was it's kind of like what I call my masters in audio, because it allowed me
Yeah.
to have so many different experiences. And it sounds like
Well,
you went.
exactly right. And I mean, the great thing about also that role, I mean, obviously, as time went on, I kind of became a reviewer, and then eventually kind of was fortunate enough to kind of move up through the tree. But you meet a lot of good people, you know. I mean, early in the day, you know, I was meeting like Matt Polk and Sandy Gross and you know, Kenny Shiwata and all these guys, and you know, picking their brains and kind of learning from them, or trying to.
Yes.
And trying to kind of, you know, and I wanted to be that guy who, if I wrote about something, I wrote about it from a credible position. You know, I mean, and now in theory, every journalist should be like that. And of course, there are a ton of, you know, incredibly talented and knowledgeable people out there. But I really, I was interested as much in the why something had been done and how it had been done as to what the product actually was. I really wanted to
Okay.
kind of always kind of get under the skin of things.
Yep.
So kind of went from there to thinking sort of some time into my career, you know what, actually maybe what I need to do here in my next step, having tried to sell hi-fi and then write about hi-fi, is actually try and make hi-fi. So we had some conversations with Bowers Wilkins, had several actually. Very dear friend of mine in the company. You know, very sadly for me, he's not there anymore. He's moved on and he's kind of enjoying the life of luxury. But Everett, who the first time I met him was in, I guess, 1996. We had a shared passion in soccer, amongst other things. He's a Dutch guy. They're big on soccer. So we just got on like a house on fire kind of immediately. He tried to recruit me pretty much then. He tried to recruit me again in like 2002, 2003, and that nearly happened. And then he came back a third time in 2009, 10, and this time I thought, you know what, this has to happen. So that's it. I've been with Bowers and Wilkins ever since. So yeah, I mean, I'm guessing if you were to talk about my time from being a journalist to today, what are we on? 27 years in the industry, if you include the retail side as well.
Wow, that's awesome.
Then that's kind of over 30 years. So yeah, it's been a substantial period of my life, to say the least.
Well, you've had a lot of different experiences in it. I love the breadth of, you know, what you've done and that kind of thing. And it's I have a little bit of engineer in me, but I tried to make a pair of speakers that I realized I wasn't good enough out there to do it, so I'd let others do it.
That's fair. That's fair.
But we kind of know how you got into business. You know, we all have that first time where we kind of go, "Wow, I can't believe music can be that good on a system." When was yours?
That's a great question. I guess it was that era of like 12, 13, when you start kind of really experiencing what a stereo image is, you know. Like I said, I was playing my music back previous to that on like a music center, I can't even remember which brand it was, which was my family's kind of music center, you know, one of those things that used to almost be like an entire sideboard, you know, like in a whole piece of furniture, and it was a flat bed.
A console.
A console, yeah, fine. So that was that, or it was like in my personal space, it was on like this little Dan set thing. So the idea that you could then, you know, kind of discern not just what the instrumentation was or what the lyrics were, but actually where the performers were, you know, and trying to get that relative position, and then the mental pictures start to form. And kind of doing that was at the same time when I was starting, kind of still pretty early to be honest with you, but starting to go to gigs and actually kind of really seeing it. So you start to get that translation moment where you can see a band on stage and you can see a performer laid out on stage, and you can kind of work out, you know, that there's the drum, the kit's set here and the guitar's here. And then you come home and you play the LP, and it's engineered in a very different way, but you still kind of get some of that illusion. I think that was really transformative. And also what it does even more than before is it kind of brings home the adrenaline rush of it all. You know, I think people in our world, of our age maybe, are kind of used to all this. I think perhaps in the modern environment, this is not, by the way, meant to be a dismissive comment, it is what it is. There are so many more routes to entertainment now, right? There are so many more different ways of entertaining yourself. In the 70s and the 80s, you know, everything, there was hardly anything. There was no games to speak of. I mean, there were those real basic ones, but, you know, people didn't sit there all day. System
Andy, I think we're having some technical difficulty getting your side out.
Important part in your okay.
Andy, are you there?
I'm still there.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, let's see if maybe it's just a moment. Let's we have a YouTube video of shall we say the manufacturing site where BMW is made. So maybe we can put that factory up and you can put the audio over top of that so that you can tell us what we're seeing.
Okay, for sure. Can you guys hear me now? Am I back on?
Yes, we can.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Robert, give us just a second here. My apologies, guys. We're using a new streaming platform today and trying to do this a little better. And so far, it's given us a little, a couple little hiccups here, it appears. So, Andy, I guess we'll go ahead until that video gets up. Oh, here it goes. All right. Andy, tell us about this.
This is the Dale Road Worthing factory where we produce the 800 series diamond. This, in fact, is the latest generation of product. So what you can see the guys doing there is they're laying up the different layers of the beach that we use to create the cabinet. And of course, those layers or depths of layers depend on the size of the cabinet. That's a robot cutter, a 5-axis CNC, which is machining away those laminates that we've created to obviously form the individual elements that go together to create the structure. And this is a table saw, a flat saw, which is cutting the ply to create the internal bracing system, which we refer to as the matrix. In the case of this particular model, the 803, it also has metal structures as well. You can see that going on the inside face of the cabinet. The top and the bottom are in place, and that's the complete cabinet assembly. It then goes off to be sanded. Again, we use a robot to that because a sanding robot is essentially a much more accurate and precise device these days than the person could be. But the end product is then checked by hand before it goes into the painting assembly. Now, on the case of a black model like this, it has a total of 8 coats, which is split into 2 batches. First batch of 4 are painted, then it's sanded, flatted back to create a smooth finish, and then the second batch of 4 are applied. Then it's finished and polished by hand. Tweeter assembly is a solid block of aluminium, and you can see that there. That again is being painted in this particular case again by hand, as is the turbine head assembly, also done by hand. So that's the solid body assembly component that lives on top of the cabinet, plus the tweeter assembly that lives on top of that. All polished by hand as well. Then these final things will come together to create clearly the finished assembly of high frequency, mid-range, and low frequency. Clearly what we've got to do then is put the moving component parts inside. So this is the diamond high frequency. Again, the domes arrive to us from Element 6 in the UK, and we do the rest of the assembly. That's a tweeter body being put together there. This is the mid-range assembly line, which we handle in the UK, and again, making the continuum cone, which is the mid-range cone you can see there in the same place. Crossovers are all done by hand and are still done by hand to this day. And each one is individually assembled as individual elements before being batch tested and then put onto the line, put onto the back of the loudspeaker. The plinth, as you can see there, is a key part of the usability. I'm sure you guys working in store that handle the product would appreciate the plinth because it makes it a damn sight easier to move the thing around.
Yes, it does.
Last parts of this is a final product assembly line, an FP line, where they're putting the cones, the turbine head, the tweeter body, the mid-range cone, and the crossover onto the product. And then it goes into a test and measurement chamber for a frequency sweep, measuring it against the original data. Assuming it passes, it comes out, it's cleaned by hand, packed, boxed, and we've made a loudspeaker. I only wish we could make them that quickly. In practice, it actually takes something approaching 3 weeks from start to finish for a black cabinet. It's a considerably longer period of time.
That's pretty involved. Seeing that the laminations on the cabinet and how they get bent and the glue going in between that and that kind of thing is just that makes it extremely inert and strong.
Yeah, it's a case of you could buy it as flat sheet and already kind of done for you. But the key point here is don't forget we're using the forming tool, so we're actually using the press to bend the structure. So the best way to do that is while the material is still pliable. So you've got individual sheet beach. There are varying numbers of layers depending on the model size. They all have the same stiffness target, but essentially as the cabinet gets bigger, we have to work harder to increase the stiffness target, because a bigger structure is more likely to bend and flex than a smaller one. That's just inherent.
Yep.
So on a smaller cabinet like an 805, there are 12 layers of wood. On a larger structure like an 800, there are 18 layers of wood, which produces a cabinet overall thickness which is 27 millimeter. So you take those 18 layers, each layer of wood then has a layer of glue dispensed between. So that layer of glue has to be measured as well. So that's 0.9 of a millimeter. So that builds up the overall structure so that we don't exceed that total 27 mil. And then there's an inner and an outer. The inner is purely cosmetic. It's just a black finish. So it just means if you guys look inside the speaker, you see a nice consistent finish. The outer is essentially the A face. So it's whatever you see the finished cabinet of the loudspeaker to be, whether that's a black or a white painted cabinet or a rose nut wooden finish. So all of those are bonded together and then bent. And they're bent under considerable amounts of heat and considerable amounts of pressure. So the press forming tool that you saw there, that's one of the smaller ones for the 803. The biggest one for the 800 produces 80 tons of vertical pressure and 60 tons of horizontal pressure. And then it heats the overall assembly up to 90 degrees. And then it sits there under that combination of heat and pressure for about 20 minutes. When it comes out off the thing, it's still hot to touch. So it has to be cooled. Once it's cooled, then it goes away to those robot cutters for the CNC process, and then we're off and kicking. We've made a cabinet.
So after that 20 minutes, it's pretty much got its shape. It's not changing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great observation and a really good point. I think the important thing to understand is all the way through those different process steps, from the first laying up of the lamination of the wood through to the final CNC assembly and bolting the thing together, every single part of that step checked at each point to make sure that you're doing the job correctly. Because once it's done and together and fully bonded, it's essentially a single structure. It's a unitary construction, and you can't take it apart, even if you wanted to. You can take it apart, you just have to crush it. That's the only way. There's no taking it apart otherwise, is the summary point. So we do an awful lot of checking work and measurement work prior to the final point where it's like it's done. Because what we don't want to do clearly is do all of that earlier work and then spend a ton of time, for example, painting it, polishing it, only then to find that there's an issue. So it's better to invest the time earlier on, kind of step checking everything before you get to that final point. Yep.
Waste is waste.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
I mean, it's good to pay attention. And, with having such intricate builds and all the pieces, I mean, I don't think people realize how many pieces are in a cabinet. And when you think just the laminations, and then you got the top and the bottom plates and, the front plates and, the aluminum you're putting in there as well. And is that aluminum or a steel plate that you're putting in there?
It's aluminium, sorry, yeah. So the U-shaped sections that you see forced down onto the front of the ply are essentially acting as stiffening bracing sections on the front of the ply. And then there's an aluminium plate that's bolted to the inner face of the main part of the cabinet. On the bigger systems, what we then do is we close couple that. So that's rigidly bolted. So on an 802 and an 800, that's rigidly bolted. So from the aluminium plate to the aluminium element of the structure, and that's with steel, that's 10 mil thick steel plate. So if you go through the full assembly on an 800, it's an aluminium plate, it's a marine ply inner construction matrix bolstered by aluminium, and then it's coupled together with sheet steel, basically.
Wow, amazing.
The thing is, right, if you wanted to characterize the why, because I think the engineering in itself is fascinating, but I think the important part is the why, right?
Yep, absolutely.
What you're trying to do is make a loudspeaker cabinet just disappear. You want it to be acoustically disappear. Now there are a bunch of things that you can do from the point of view of minimizing cabinet diffraction, curvature and forms and stuff like that, tweeter on top, turbine head, to help reduce the kind of the audible impact effect of a drive unit in a cabinet. That's the sound of drive units in a box, and you get all that stuff going on. So we do all of that and decoupling and other things. But that's acoustic. Dealing with velocity through the structure, dealing with energy through the system requires stiffness fundamentally. Right. So we're using as many interesting material types and as many advanced process types as we can to try and make the system just disappear acoustically by reducing essentially the coloration that moves through the system by minimizing its vibration. So that extreme curve that you see, that wrap form, that's not just there to look pretty. It's the summary point, right? It's there actually because it has sound acoustic reason. That's a pun. It has solid acoustic reasons for why it's beneficial. I mean, at its simplest level, a standard regular box, even our more affordable regular boxes, has 4 corners, right? It has 1, 2, 3, 4. Each corner is a weak point. Clearly, because you've got a joint between a joint and another joint, and it's gonna have, you know, the opportunity for, you know, structural instability at that point, depending on how well you make it. What we try and do is cut out the possibility by reducing the number of joints. So that extreme curvature, as you can imagine, if it's shaped like that, there are only now 2 joints which are at the back. Right. They're a long way away from the drive units. The gap between those 2 joints is as narrow as we can possibly make them. And what we're doing is placing the drive units right at the heart of the stiffest point of the whole system, which is at the front of the curvature. Mm-hmm. So that's the reason why it's the shape that it is. I know people sometimes look at, you know, some of our more unusual shapes and think, well, they're just trying to kind of draw a pretty shape and make something interesting. But actually, we're not. Clearly,
they have a real purpose.
They do, yeah. I mean, you know, obviously, you're going to drop $30,000 on something. You have a right to expect it to be beautiful as well, and we fully respect that, of course. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of work that goes into making them look beautiful, and the finish standards and everything else as well. But the reasons they are the shape that they are all about acoustics and performance, sound quality.
Yeah, it's, you know, you're trying to listen to the drivers only. Yeah, and exactly. You know, and then manufacture the best drivers that you possibly can. And you know, and the crossover has a lot to do with it too. Lately, I know that y'all have made some improvements in the 600 and 700 series, and we're going to talk about those here in a minute. Mm-hmm. But you know, in the 800s, as far as the crossovers go and that kind of thing, how much work is done on the crossover to make sure that it's, you know, putting out what it should to the drivers?
Huge. I mean, there are 2 parts to the crossover concept, right? First and foremost, we try and design the simplest possible circuit that we can. I mean, we're typically using first order where we can. You know, it's first order in and out on the HF, second order on the mid, and third on the LF. So we're trying to keep reducing the number of components. Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I think you're cutting out again, man. Right when we were getting in the good stuff. Hopefully, Andy will come back here in just a minute. So, you know, first order networks are something that help keep time domain, correct? And shall we say we have mostly time products in the building. So B&W being a part of that, Wilson being a part of that, and also Vandersteen Audio being time and phase coherent. So, you know, time is a very important thing. Our brains, we're very time dependent. So that's one of the things that I've learned through the years, and it just helps us have a more comfortable and not as noisy play to us. So guys, I apologize to y'all out there as to the technical difficulties that we're having. You know, have any questions or anything I can try and answer while we're waiting to kind of get the group back together? There he is.
What happened, guys?
I'm not sure. Something got disconnected. We didn't hear you for a little bit, and then all of a sudden you went away. But welcome back.
No. So I was doing all this good stuff about crossovers as well.
I know. So let's get into that. Tell me about the crossovers.
The crossover design philosophy is trying to keep it simple, right? It's the fewest possible component parts that we try. We are talking like a resistor and a cap and a bypass cap and a heatsink and not much else. You know, it's pretty. We have a really good understanding of how the drive. As a result, we can, because you know, essentially it's our responsibility to know the behavior of the, you know, we understand those mesh points. And that's kind of inherent in our philosophy on crossover design. So apologies, but yeah, we're typically the LF, but not much else. It's quite straightforward stuff. and high value componentry. So, you know, the typical go-to from our perspective in terms of the premium products is Mundorf, as I'm sure most people are knowing. They're very familiar with the brand. So we use the Evo model in the mid-range, the 700 series, and we use typically the Supreme in the 800 series. We've these days working with Bevanby for the 600 series, the more affordable range. That's actually our recent step 2 or upgrade. We used to use MPA, but we're using Bevanby now, which are great, working really well, good value. You know, and the other part is, you know, just simple design. You know, as I say, trying to focus on you know, making it as clean as possible, and we believe that you get good results from that. I mean, having this sort of mid-range cone philosophy that we have kind of helps, right? Because using a flexible cone, as we do, the continuum cone, you can let it out. You know, it can cover a pretty broad range of frequencies.
And that's a suspended cone.
Excuse me?
In your in the literature and stuff, it's a suspended cone, so it's decoupled.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay. So, yeah, you're referring to the mid-range here. We're talking about the FST.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that depends on the design. So in a two-way, like a 606 or an 805 or something like that, it's a rigidly coupled system. It's not decoupled.
Right.
And it's got a surround because it's obviously a dynamic cone at that point. It's having to do more excursion. It's actually having to go lower down in frequency because we're asking it to play, you know, bass as well as mid-range. In a three-way, we use the FST system, the fixed suspension transducer. So there's no surround on the edge of the cone. It's retained in place by essentially a foam retainer, fundamentally, that sort of just provides an air seal. And then the cone itself is only operating over it doesn't have anything like the excursion. It's coupled into the system, and on modern ones, it's actually decoupled. It's actually floating, living on a suspension. So the only FST that's not decoupled now in our 600 is our 603. On all of our larger models, 700 series, 800 series, there it's all a fully floating assembly, and it really helps because obviously decoupling the entire assembly, it's not just the cone, clearly it's the whole thing. So it's the basket, the motor, spider, everything. Decoupling it from the cabinet means you get fundamentally just less noise from the cabinet, energy from the low frequency cones, whatever else getting into the cone, the mid-range, and as a result we get a cleaner output. And also the energy from the cone itself, the mid-range cone, is not wasted radiating the structure. It goes outwards into the room much more effectively. So the end result is you get a bigger, more open, more transparent sound for your money.
It's amazing the amount of work that you can do taking a same material and then figuring out how to make it sound better.
Well, you know, I mean, the cone material, I think, is, you know, I mean, a lot of this is logical evolutionary stuff for us, right? I mean, we discovered the virtues. I'm sure every loudspeaker engineer would say this thing. As collectively, the audio industry discovered the virtues of decoupling a long time ago. I mean, quite a few different companies do it in different ways. Yep. What's definitely changed over time is the ability to measure more accurately. I think that the best way to think about it is if you imagine the power of the phone in your pocket or the computer in your home and compare it back to 15 years ago and think how clunky those things were. We and every other audio engineering group across the world are in that same kind of boat now. We've got massively more powerful measurement tools than we did. That allows us to simulate and measure more accurately and run those simulations faster than we could before.
Yeah, manufacturing processes and abilities have become, you know, I mean, both of those things have kind of come forward and allowed, you know, much improvement to come along. Everybody says, well, you know, how much better can they make a cone in 5 or 10 years? And I say you'd be amazed.
You can always make it better. I think, look at it another perspective, right? I mean, people who lived in the Middle Ages who thought the Earth was flat, they weren't stupid. That's just what they knew because that was based on their level of knowledge and understanding at the time. So, you know, you look at what we did, what we even in the last generation of 800 series were doing. We were making what we thought was a pretty damn inert structure. I mean, you know, they weighed a ton. Anybody would tell you, try to move them, and they felt pretty solid. But it was only when we got to a point that we were able to use a scanning vibrometer, you know, a laser system, and really powerful FEA simulation using a system called COMSOL multiphysic, that we were really able to look really closely. I mean, really properly closely what was going on. And at that point, we kind of realized that it was nowhere near as inert or as dead as we thought it was. And that's when you start to uncover problems, and then you start to have to think about ways to deal with those problems. And what I'm trying to say by all of that is I'm confident, to your exact point, that in 5 years' time, we'll be doing the same thing with what we're making now. We'll be looking back on those products and kind of going, why do we do it like that? And we'll be coming up with something else, because that's just how it is, right?
Well, it's all, all the guys. I mean, there's so many, obviously, engineers with pretty large engineer backgrounds that are working in the industry, and have, we've even had some come from aerospace and that kind of thing as well. And seeing what they're doing in this industry with the passion for music behind them and that kind of thing to really drive them forward to, I've got to figure out a better way. And it's just always great to see companies marching forward.
Well, I think it's inspiring. I do genuinely mean this as well. I mean, not just the stuff that we do, but across the board, right? And there's always good ideas out there. But I think fundamentally what we're doing, right, is known science at the end of the day. It's stepping into methodologies that have been around for a period of time, like the internal combustion engine or the principles of flight or something like that. So what we're trying to do is do what others have done before us, but we're just trying to do it better. So you start from a baseline of data. You've got like a reference point. What I'm in awe of is the people who made that first giant leap into new spaces. Now, we're not that company, but somewhere along the line, some guy somewhere or a team of people somewhere went, you know what? The phone doesn't need hard buttons. What it needs is a screen. And as I think the guys from Apple said at the time, this changes everything, right? But it did. I mean, think about the world prior to that and before and now, So whereas I think if you looked at a speaker from 1975 and you looked at a speaker today, you'd probably go, hey, they're both speakers. Yep. I think if you looked at a phone from 1975 and you looked at a phone today, you'd freak somebody out from the past, wouldn't they? They'd be going, what the hell is this? Yes. It's just like a Stargate communicator or something. This doesn't look like a phone.
Especially a big red one off of Sherwin Vega. Oh gosh. All right. So your path to BMW obviously is very rich in the history and that kind of thing. But tell us a little bit about what you know about BMW, really about who they are, not what they are. In other words, culture.
Oh, okay. Okay, so really straightforward stuff, right? Driven, passionate about music. Good enough isn't good enough for us. One of the key problems that I have working alongside a lot of my colleagues, in a positive way, by the way, is it's incredibly hard sometimes to get them to stop. There's no such thing as like the last stone unturned. They'll just keep going and going and going until they found the new thing. It's direct, honest. We want to try do better. I'd like to think it's not necessarily arrogant. It's much more just about pride than arrogance, probably. And I think the outcome is a lot of people within the organization really care passionately about trying to do better. And we never stop that internal process. In many ways, we're almost like our own worst enemy, because we know that'll be the thing sometimes. Whereas perhaps if the company was a more cynical company, it would just push out a new product because the time frame was done and it was like 3 years or 2 years and we need to have a new model, so let's push something out. We're not like that. We have this whole kind of thing of like, well, if it's going to replace what we've done already, then it better be good, and we better find out how to make it better than good. So what do we need to do? And we almost set the mountain for us to climb. Do you know what I mean? And that's just the innate nature of what we do. So yeah, it's I never felt quite so dumb in life as the first day I worked at SRE, proper SRE, like from when I started stenning. And I realized I was literally the only person in the room who wasn't like at least one PhD. Because but at the same time, that's just an amazing place to work, because if you can earn their respect, which isn't easy, and if you can keep up with them, which really isn't easy, then my God, you learn a lot, and you learn it quick, right? Because they just pour their passion and their knowledge into you, because they know if you're better at it, everything's going to work better and you're all going to move faster. So it's, I think, sharing rather than divisive, and it's very much a collective thing. He's no longer with us. He works with another company now, but one of my, again, very good friends in the company used to say that we refer to kind of collective intelligence, and that makes it sound a bit like we're the Borg from Star Trek, and that's not what I mean. But it's like a collective idea of like, it's never one person's project, it's everyone's project. Yep. And the more we all collectively push into it, the more we're all going to get out of it at the end.
I think it's really important that more heads are better than one, and sometimes you can have too many. But I think if everybody's going in the same direction, I think it's always great, and it sounds like that's the culture there. I was going to remark on the pride comment. I think every time that somebody does their best at whatever it is they're trying to do, they should be prideful in that. And so I don't see that as anything anywhere close to arrogant. I think pride's a wonderful thing. So anyway.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I agree with you. I suppose what I'm trying to say about the arrogance thing is, look, Bowers Wilkins is of a certain size, right? And we know that.
Yep.
And there are other brands out there that aren't, and we know that too. I suppose what I wanted to get across in that comment is that the company has a pride in its own achievements and its own way of doing things, but isn't arrogant enough to say that other people can't achieve as well. Do you know what I mean? So we recognize the quality and the capability of other engineers, other brands.
That's very well said.
And in some cases have a sneaking admiration for what they do, and that's fine. We're just proud of what we do. And I don't think the two necessarily have to mean,
Nope.
You don't have to be exactly what you said.
No, and I think, I think also we look at other designs and we learn from that.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. I mean,
sometimes people learn from that.
Yeah. Sometimes people come up with really good stuff,
Yep. So I'm going to take just a moment and do a little housekeeping here. And I am so happy to have Andy Kerr here, Director of Product Marketing and Communications with Bowers Wilkins. And if y'all will, again, this is Alan Jones with HiFi Buys, and this is HiFi Chats number 27. If y'all will, please ask any questions that you got going on out there for Andy. He is very much in the factory, at the factory, and really knows what's going on. And if you will, like and subscribe to our channel, please. And if you don't mind, just you can go to hifibuys.com and get on a newsletter. We appreciate it very much. And also, there's a link over in the chat on the right for you to, there's what they call a HiFi Chats playlist. And that's basically all the music that's been discussed. So before we get too much into product, I do want to find out a little bit about one of your favorite, like that first time when you went, wow. Do you remember what music was playing?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things you'll find, I have just a ridiculously eclectic music taste, and one of my primary sort of maybe achievements within the company is the kind of my role of kind of bringing new music to new people. So I'm responsible, for example, for all the playlists that we do.
That's awesome.
Demonstration. But it's just because I'm slightly addicted. But yeah, I mean that first era of stuff was all the rage. Like I say, when I was young, I was listening to the punk, new wave, and that kind of era. But when I kind of, the next thing that you do, like a natural progression, is you start to go back. So 13, 14, still like with my large collection of modern music. I started to kind of buy back from earlier stuff, so like 70s and then 60s. And the first absolute wow moment was Led Zeppelin, who still have a huge place in my heart, to this day. And I was listening to, let me think, Houses of the Holy.
Yep.
And just like hearing because the thing about that kind of music, if you were already into like the kind of stuff that I was listening to, which is like the Jam and the Pistols and the Clash and all that kind of stuff, listening to Zeppelin by that point was similar. They weren't, it's not quite as folky or as kind of chilled as like Three, when when they're kind of just like discovering their inner selves. It's back to being a bit more hardcore. And some of the stuff on that at the start is just like, wow, where does that come from? And that's, so the soundstage that went with that, the energy that went with that, the presence that went with that. And most importantly, and I think the thing that, the real wow moment is listening to Bonzo. It's listening to the power of the world's best drummer at that time. Whether he, you can have your own debate about other drummers, but at that time, I would say that was the case. And feeling it in the room, decades on, being relayed to me through a pair of loudspeakers, that was like, that's rock and roll. That was really fun.
Yeah, I agree with you on where his level was in drumming at that point.
Yeah,
amazing guy. Just, I mean, that was, I don't know. I'm sitting here just trying to gather my word about it, because I did just powerful.
Yes, it's the sense of, and I guess that was kind of the music that I got drawn to a lot, and certainly in the early days, and maybe to some extent even today, right? Across genres, across types, it's play committed, so play like it's the last time you're going to play, which is kind of what a lot of the early new wave and punk bands used to do, and so that translated into him, and then it kind of went into more technical bands, so they're a different approach completely, but Floyd of that era were kind of, you suddenly realize that that's like an artistry as well as an energy, but it's still nonetheless elemental and exciting and visceral, but just in the kind of different approach. And then it kind of broadened out, so I genuinely will tell you now, and all the people who know me will tell you that my breadth will be as diverse as you could possibly imagine, and I'll be listening to 50s Ray Charles, and then the next minute it'll be something from last week, and that's the way to go, I think. And and again, I'm not going to lie and say it was when I was 9, 10, but I even kind of like by the 15, 16, 17 started turning on to classical. I won't say that I play it a ton of times. I have to be in the right place and the right mood to play it, but when I am, it's that same thing of like that visceral, and I like all the kind of, you're gonna guess this already, but I like all the kind of the visceral kind of exciting adrenaline rush kind of composers, so you give me Prokofiev or Tchaikovsky, kind of going for it. That's that same place from music in my head, and it works the same way on me.
I just look at the genius behind being able to write a symphony is just, I swear. It's like if it's the whole idea of like Beethoven's Ninth or something like that, right? Just the whole idea of not only being able to string together something quite so remarkable, but at that point in life, being able to do it when you're stone deaf. It's just like, what? You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I don't think the best thing I always say, and you can disagree with it if you want, right? I don't think there's any such thing as bad music. Now, I'm sure everybody who has a strong opinion about certain modern performers will be spitting their beer out at that point, whatever it might be. But the point I'm trying to make here is, somewhere along the line, there is someone somewhere in the world that loves the music that you hate. Because that's how it is. There is always someone somewhere who likes it. The point about music is, don't narrow your opinions and don't narrow your choices based on built-in prejudice that you might not like it. Try it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But that doesn't make it bad. It just means it's not music for you. And I think that's the perspective, right? So I would always encourage somebody to be as diverse as they possibly can be. And if you've gone to, the lengths of investing, particularly in a hi-fi or an audio system, and then your record collection or whatever it is that you use to play music consists of like 15 performers, and you've only got like 45 records, kind of missing the point, dude. Yeah, I would agree with that. I love the diversity in it, and that's the thing that I love. It's what I've loved about being in the business, is being able to share music with others and have them share it with me. And and it sounds like you're that guy at the company.
That's what we all do. I mean, you do it. It sounds like it. I mean, everybody, whenever I get together with the guys in the States, and obviously we haven't done that in a period because of the COVID situation, but that's what we do. We spend time swapping cuts, and it's like, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Have you tried? And it's part of the fun, it's like a bonding period. It's like, we spend that first afternoon kind of just throwing new stuff out. Some of my favorite times in life, genuinely in this audio industry, have been doing exactly that, whether it's with friends or, I mean, I've done it with like, extreme situations. I was with Lee Ronaldo from Sonic Youth. Rock and roll, right? And we were in an apartment in New York with there's me and there's Kathleen actually, and we're literally we just spent like an hour just hanging out and playing music. And I have to remember I was big into Sonic Youth, so it was, but like 15 minutes in, we're just two guys playing songs. And that's what I like about music when it's done right. It does that. It just brings that part of you together, and you forget the rest. And he's a fun guy.
Yeah, and there's no real divide in music loving.
No, definitely not. And there shouldn't be. Like I say, I don't go back and point. The only divide comes from the fact that if you approach it from either a closed-minded perspective, or potentially from even a kind of a snobbery perspective, where you say, hey, it was made last year, therefore it must be, not good. And I rail against that. And I rail against it even from the perspective of demonstrations as well. I think one of the really important things that we as an industry and as a group of professionals within the industry need to do is continue to be as inclusive as we can to that younger generation and to that younger type of performer, and that's that younger kind of music. Because if we all still want to be here in 10 years' time, we cannot keep just demonstrating with Niels Lofgren and the Eagles and stuff like that, because there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that music, but it doesn't resonate with somebody who was born in 20. They need something new. They need what they've grown up with, and then you introduce them to the classic cuts as well.
Yep. Well, I think it's I always get told all the time that younger people aren't listening to music, and I'd say, well, no, that's not true. They're just not listening to what you are.
That's you know what, and I swear this is true. I genuinely believe more young people are listening to music today than were when I was young, and the reason I believe that is because it's so much more accessible. If you wanted to get access to the popular music charts, the top 20 or 30 or 40, whatever, you used to have to wait till the week that it came out and then listen to it on the radio, and then maybe you'd record it if you were of a certain, and that was it. The only other time you could get music was like when it was played on the radio, or if you went to the store and you bought the record. Now kids can get music anywhere. You can be halfway up a mountain hanging upside down streaming albums. Not only that, but they've got a ton of easily accessible ways of replaying music. I mean, again, here's the irony. If you saw somebody in the 80s or the 90s walking down the street wearing a big pair of cans like that, they were a DJ. They were a DJ. That's what they did. That was what. Nobody else did that. Just DJs. Everybody else just wore like the standard kind of things. Remember the yellow foam and that kind of metal strap, and that was all. So the modern world is full of opportunities to listen to music in passably good quality, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. And that's definitely not the case in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. I guarantee that's not the case.
Well, streaming has certainly changed the world. I mean, it's allowed me to, without others showing me music, I can go find all kinds of music and look through it and try and figure out, what I like and, what's new out there. And, it has shown us that the idea that there's no new good music is just nuts.
Oh, for sure. And also, if you're fortunate enough to have a streaming subscription to one of the premier services, I mean, Qobuz being the great example. I mean, it's incredible, the sound quality. It's not like something I need to make apologies for. It's not, it's not like a 96 kilobit per second MP3 from a decade ago. This is like high res. This is premium, and tonally and spatially, not just like, from a data transfer rate, from an actual kind of spectral presentation. It sounds really, really good. Really, really good. So to the extent that, I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, I still have a CD player. I haven't used my CD player in a long time. I have a Rega turntable. I'm a huge fan of Rega turntables. It's a nice Rega turntable. And that's my kind of my spoil myself music source. And then everything else I'm doing these days is streamed, or it's on my NAS drive, so and that's fine, because I think it sounds great. I really do.
What's funny is I've got a NAS drive and I've hardly played anything from it, just because it's all so much available on Tidal and Qobuz. I subscribe to both in my home, and fortunate enough to be able to do so. And it's I don't know. I fought streaming, and then when I embraced it, I realized what a dummy I was not to embrace it sooner. Hey, let's get into a little bit of product here if we can.
Uh-huh.
Y'all have very recently, and we've got on our floor as well, the new 600 anniversary edition.
Uh-huh.
And tell us how that kind of came about and what the improvements are.
So I love 600 series. In fact, if you spoke to my dear friend and colleague Steve Pierce, I think to the two of us, the 600 series is in many ways as important as the 800, and the reason is it's like the accessible way to get a slice of us.
Yep.
You know, it gets you into the difference that we like to think we offer. You can argue about whether we do or not, but the difference that we like to think that we offer at a way more accessible price point. Now, the 600 series we define launched in 1995. There were some earlier models that had carried the 600 badge, but they were always isolated. The actual true 600 series of a range of models was 1995. So, 25 years was coming up this year. It seemed fitting that we wanted to celebrate it. Now, some of you guys will know we had a major upgrade in 2018 where we cascaded in the continuum cone technology that we'd used and developed originally in 2015 for 800 series. And simply the reason for doing that was because we were so amazed by the performance of continuum and so keen to roll it into product that we wanted to get through that process as quickly as we could. So in 18, 600 series came in, 700 series had at the preceding season, 17, pardon me. So by the end of 2018, we'd gone from a world of what we now refer to as the polyomatic aramid fiber, Kevlar. We'd gone from that world to continuum in a 3-year cycle pretty quickly.
That's so amazing.
That was good, and it made a massive step change to the performance of the product. So we didn't feel that we needed to kind of completely rip up the design now, and it wasn't for one moment anything to do with feeling that the product was failing or anything to do with feeling that the product needed an injection to kind of compete with the competition. Because I mean, you can check out the independent reviews. Most independent reviews already held that even in 2020, the existing regular standard 600 series models were amongst the leaders, if not in some cases still the best in their category. So what we wanted to do was more give a gift, if you like, to our loyal fans. More than 1 million pairs of 600 series loudspeakers have been sold globally.
Wow.
Since 1995. So let's celebrate that. Let's try and take a moment to kind of give it an appropriate acknowledgement from the point of view of the brand, and let's try and, like I said, give a little bit of a gift to our fans. So the task was improve the performance without driving a ton of money into the cost. As you will know, I'm sure the retail prices in almost all cases have hardly increased at all. Yep. In fact, most cases are literally the exact same. Yes. But what we wanted to do was enough to sort of make them stand out. So the preceding year, we did a CI 700 series upgrade project, turning it into the S2. And along the way, we found a new type of capacitor from Bevanby that we really liked. We felt that we could include that into the 600 series pretty cost effectively. At the same time, we were working on the upgrade project for the signature edition 700 series, which we also launched earlier there. And we came across a new type of bypass capacitor, which again was a big step change in capability, but wasn't what we would call prohibitively expensive. It's not a cheap part, but it wasn't prohibitively expensive. And that means we could potentially consider using it elsewhere too. So the combination of those two, the Bevanby caps and the signature derived bypass caps, we rolled into 600. So driving it's the same, the cones are the same, but the filters, the circuits are radically improved by components that come from essentially 700 series level products. And the result of that, well, hopefully you'd agree if you've heard them, but the result of that is clearly audible. They sound more refined. They have greater resolution. Spatially, they sound better. They sound more open. Essentially, it's a really good, but at the same time, like I said, cost-effective upgrade, which is why we didn't pass it on in terms of massively increased prices. In fact, to say we tried to hold the price. The other thing we did, go on after you.
It is really amazing when you think crossover components, how important are they? And you realize when you have a product like the 600 series that actually has sounded so great already with the improvements that you'd made, and then basically putting premium crossover components in there, and the speaker just goes to another level. And it's something that's very easy to hear.
The best way to think about it is, I think it's like gas in a car, right? If you had a really good engine and then you put, you know, the low grade kind of lowest quality gasoline into the car, you're not going to get the maximum out of the system. So, you know, what a crossover fundamentally does is it allows the drive units within the enclosure to perform optimally and do more. And it just essentially makes the whole system just hum. So it's injecting premium grade, the best of the best, high grade gasoline into the system and improving the performance pretty effectively, which is exactly what's happened. And, you know, you can back to back them. I'm sure you have. Take a regular 606 and take an anniversary, and you can hear it straight away. And that's why we just, you know, we said, well, what we're going to do is just give everybody the opportunity to kind of sell through on the existing models, and then we're going to stop making them. We don't want them out there in parallel. So the anniversary edition is the current one, and will remain so going forward.
Awesome. Well, you know, I have been amazed at how many of the 600 series that we've sold, and I know that we've had a couple of customers that have upgraded from the 600 series that we had sold them to the new Signature and our, excuse me, Anniversary. I get those two confused between the 6 and 700, but should we say on the Anniversary 600s, and the improvements have just been amazing. The guys that have installed them have also mentioned it too. So it's been a really, really, really nice jump, and I'm sure y'all will see a significant jump in your sales as well.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's great to hear. I mean, obviously, the other important point, I think, go back on the point is we wanted to make a song and dance about it from a marketing point of view, from a visibility point of view as well. I mean, you might have seen some of the assets that the team created to try and really celebrate it and promote it. You know, 25 years of making any range of something is quite a big deal. And we came up with that line about for the love of music, you know, because that's what we think the speakers are for, right? They're not necessarily targeted at what you might call the hardcore audiophile community. There are obviously some buyers that go that way. They're much more like that story about me when I was young, right? They're that person who's buying their first pair of speakers, or, you know, somebody who's looking for a value for an upgrade over something else that they purchased, but they want something a bit more special. So
it makes great sound reachable.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and I think that was the methodology. And you know, I think they've achieved on that remit. You know, so we're pretty pleased with them. The Signature that you mentioned, obviously that's a slightly different thing. We can go into that if you want to discuss the Signature.
Let's talk about the 700 series kind of first, and then kind of what we've done in the Signature series to be able to get that speaker to where it is. By the way, I just love the new finish on that too. That's just gorgeous.
You and me and everyone else, right? So Signature is sorry, let's go 700 series first, excuse me. So 700 series, it's about trying to bridge the gap between our entry level clearly and our premium range, and it allows us, because of the target pricing and the opportunity that brings, the scope to kind of do a bit more from an engineering perspective, both in terms of quality of componentry and also things like forms and structures. So whereas a 600 series, we mentioned it before, the mid-range cone is rigidly coupled on a three-way loudspeaker. On a 700 series model, whether it's a 704 or a 3 or a 2, the mid-range cone is fully decoupled. It floats inside the housing to kind of maximize its energy, and as I said earlier on. So that's one key step change. It has an improved high frequency. It has the carbon dome tweeter, which again is kind of a little bit too expensive to include in the 600 series, but that steps up in terms of resolution, in terms of transparency compared to what we have with the 600. The big thing that you'll notice is in both the tower and the bookshelf model, we have the flagships, the 705 and the 702, and they include tweeter on top. And I think if you were to encapsulate or summarize one thing that both from a visual and from an acoustic point of view most identifies a Bowers Wilkins product, it's that form of the tweeter on top. I mean, going way back to the mid-1970s, it's a very iconic piece of engineering. It has very sound engineering reasons behind why it works, and it really, really works. And the minute you take the tweeter out of the baffle and stick it into its own housing, the audible uplift is massive. So, you know, 705 and 702, I would strongly argue were like the best value in kind of mid-tier premium audio, because they had a flavor of an 800 series, with a significantly reduced sticker, and they kind of got you way above the level that you could get with any tweeter mounted in a box, including our own 703 and 706. They're a real big deal, which is why those two models were the models that we chose when we wanted to introduce a signature one, because signature's always been associated with that tweeter on top technology going all the way back to its earliest days.
Yes, I've been amazed too with the 700 series how friendly they are to a lot of amplifiers. Mm-hmm. So you're able to get a kind of a really big sound, like you say, that has a lean towards the 800s without having to, in all cases, buy this huge audio system to be able to go with it. Not that they won't respond to it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's an important point, right? I mean, we're somewhere along the line, and it's funny how things stick in hi-fi, I think once upon a time, we tended to produce systems overall that weren't necessarily so sensitive, or perhaps were a bit sticky in terms of their impedance. Mm-hmm. And we got a reputation that, if you wanted a Bowers and Wilkins, that's fine, but you need a huge amp to make a move. And that's just really not the case. I mean, sure, like you just said, you stick more power in, you'll get the benefit. But you can get a 700 series to sing off an AVR or off I have a name Unity Atom you can see over there with a pair of 707s.
Yep,
it's fine. It's perfectly good, and it sounds great. They're not necessarily a brick wall to drive. They do, like you just said, they like output. That's not a problem. They'll happily eat it up, but at the same time, you don't have to start that way. And I think the other important point about them is that room friendliness, that accessibility, right? I think for us as the kind of hardcore in the audio category, we're kind of used to the shape and the form and the look of an 800 series, and we love it, and we'll accommodate it. A lot of people won't. They want a more regular looking loudspeaker. Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing with the form of a 700 is you can empower it with a lot of clever stuff to make it perform to a really high standard, but at the same time, it's a very elegant device. It's in no way what I would say challenging, whereas I fully recognize that to some people the form and the shape of an 800 might be a bit challenging. A 700 doesn't do that. It kind of just slots into your home in a very contributory kind of way, but when it's there, it sounds beautiful.
So let's I absolutely agree. And when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the signature series in the 702 and 705. 702 mm-hmm. a floor standard speaker is just really, really awesome. So
yeah, I mean, it's signatures in general terms is a very powerful name for us, and something that you'll be pleased to hear that we're going to do quite a bit more of in future. So, I mean, some of you guys will know, right? JB died. John Bowers, excuse me, sorry, JB. John Bowers died in 1987, and one of the first major projects that emerged after his death was the signature series, and it essentially was designed to be a celebration of everything that he'd achieved to that date. So if I want to characterize that a little bit more, what a signature series loudspeaker does always is kind of act as like the apex of our engineering thinking up until the point when it comes out. So you won't ever see a signature loudspeaker introduce something completely new that we've not had for the time in like cone technology. That's the role of an 800.
Right.
But what a signature will do is it take everything that we know to that point, and then it will turn it up to 11. It's like the whole idea of like absolutely maximizing all of our known knowledge, all of our known thinking, and all of our known processes in terms of things like design and finish. So all the signature models have done that. I mean, including, of course, the original famous silver signature back in 1991. And this was the same idea here. It was like, well, if you took a relatively speaking, as I said just now, accessible, but value performance product like a 702 or a 705, and then you kind of just turned it all up to the max, what can you achieve? And well, you've heard them, right? And they're special. That's like juicing the crossover, using the best possible components in the crossover, and then it's that finish which is just staggering. And I still see them now and it's kind of wow. But we're really pleased with it. The data, it just looks beautiful.
Well, I will tell you, it's a very elegant looking speaker, and I like some of the trim and that kind of thing where y'all have changed up some of the colors and some of the trim, especially on the tapered tube unit up top and that kind of thing. And it's just again, a very, very elegant speaker that sounds amazing, responds to about anything you put in it. And anyway, just a great job by you guys. I was really excited when I saw that come along.
Well, thank you. I mean, the trim detail is supposed to be a reference to those preceding models. Again, if you guys have time, look at the.
I remember them. They were what, signature like 80 and 60 or something like that.
Yeah. So we had exactly. So signature 30, signature 25.
Okay.
And the original model is 1991, which is the silver signature. So so that was a two-way, actually, with like the asymmetric tweeter, which was a thing that we used to have at that time. So the tweeters were kind of stepped inward on the soundstage with a 6.5-inch cone, and it was, I mean, it was a ton of money. It was like 8,000 or something like that. You know, and external crossovers.
They were beautiful and had that one little silver bar that went across the.
You got it. and then it kind of moved up from there. But that silver bar call out that you just mentioned was what we were trying to reference in the industrial design of the new one. So that's why, although it has that silver detailing, it's just a kind of flashback, if you like, to or a reference back to the original. Much like the wood, you know. I mean, no two pair of the signature models are the same. It's always unique. The graining. And you know, you get the plaque on the back and all the rest of it. So they're hopefully going to be something that, you know, you buy and they'll have a value beyond their, you know, their ticket price. They'll actually retain their value and be something that, you know, assuming you want to keep them for a period and then maybe trade them up, they'll still have a ready audience of people who are interested in buying them, because that's certainly the case with the current ones. I mean, again, if you look on any kind of used hi-fi market, you can find, you know, without too much looking, you can find some signature models for sale. But it's amazing the prices people want to ask for them. You know, they've definitely retained their value.
Well, I'm glad that y'all have a definition for what a signature series speaker is. I didn't expect that from you, but I'm glad that you have it defined. So not only from the past, but also today, and also what that will mean in the future too. So that's pretty neat.
Cool.
So let's tell us a little bit about, you know, when you're designing a new speaker. What are the things that, you know, we've talked about cabinets and things along that lines. I mean, you basically go through every little piece of the speaker to try and figure out where you can find little dividends. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, your start point, if you're looking at the research process in general, it's based on a sort of set of known parameters and known data and known process. I mean, depending on the timeline requirement as well.
Right.
If you're trying to do something, you know, within a shorter period, so let's say 3 years from our perspective, you're more likely to work within existing models, things that you understand already, and then work out how to engineer them in, like taking a continuum cone and engineering it into a 600 series. If you're looking for a longer project timeline and it's less restrictive, then you can kind of blue sky more and kind of step into new territories and try new things, and that would probably most likely be with something like an 800 or something like that. So, you know, all of the major innovative breakthroughs in transducer tech over the course of the last 8-9 years have been, you know, driven fundamentally by what we've learned on 800, because we've got we put more engineers behind it, and, you know, it is what it is, and B, we just got more time. You know, so typically it's somewhere between 5 and 6 years for a cycle time on a replacement for 800 series. So you've got more scope to just spend time, you know, thinking things through, working things through. I think, as I said to you earlier on, you know, the other key part is accuracy of knowledge. It's understanding, you know. So you've got to look or reassess again everything that you're doing, challenge everything that you're doing, and try and fix or find out where it's broken. Do you see what I mean? So yes. we use COMSOL multiphysic to simulate all of the major structures, model them, and understand their behavior, and then find the issues. And then, you know, the task becomes, okay, we've got all these problems. How can we try and solve them? But in many ways, the finding and identifying the problems is just as hard as you know, working out what to do to try and resolve them.
So when you were using the software to kind of design the 800s, how did you come up with, you know, like this size of cabinet needs this many laminates and this size of cabinet needs this many laminates? I guess there's some kind of math that can be done in that regard that, you know, you go over that. I see the tremendous bracing all the way through the cabinet as well. And is most of that done through computer design or aid?
All of it, absolutely. So CAD will form the structure, but simulation work will inform the knowledge that helps decide, you know, the material types, the properties, where the critical bracing needs to go, all of that. So you begin, like I said, from a baseline perspective, you're looking at the last generation cabinet, and you're identifying what those fundamental problems could be. In some cases there aren't many, and in some cases there are lots, right? And then having kind of worked those out, then you need to work out what opportunities exist to fix things. Now, the important point to understand is all of that's based against a series of parameters that are beyond what we would like to do. An obvious example, you know, these things are a certain size and a certain weight. If they become too big and too heavy, then, you know, they're almost impossible to move, and the shipping costs increase and the freight costs increase, and everything gets passed on to the end consumer. So, you know, certain materials are just out, or certain ways of doing things are just out, because, you know, the end game would be a speaker that would weigh, you know, 500 or 600 pounds. And, you know,
they're out there.
well, you know, I mean, as it is, you know, like the turbine head, I'm sorry, we're all metric in the UK, so I'm not so good at pounds. You guys can work it out. But I mean, the turbine head is 18 kilograms, which I guess is what, 35, 40 pounds, I suppose. So, you know, that's a thing, right? But that's a single piece casting of solid aluminium. If you were to translate that philosophy approach into the low frequency enclosure, it would certainly be very good. Yes. It would certainly work very well, but wow, would it be heavy? And, you know, that would have a payoff in terms of all of those things. So some of the processes that we're working to are offsetting what would be the, you know, the most desired by just reality in terms of, you know, target retail price, reality in terms of, you know, like I say, things like shipping, movement, getting them in. You know, again, you can make a 10-foot tall loudspeaker. It's not particularly hard. Getting it into your house, that's hard. So,
I remember, you know, I had a pair of Acoustat 6600s one time. And I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're way on up there. There's some houses. I remember I sold them to a guy. He had 2 inches between the top of that speaker and his ceiling. But it was a lot of fun to listen to. But anyway, that, you know, I get that. I think you know, we all have to look at what is reality, okay, and what we can do within, you know, what that reality is. And you know, the Nautilus was certainly a speaker yacht going way outside of you know, what I would say, even though that speaker is not a monstrously huge speaker, but that is one unique product.
Yeah, I think the thing to understand about Nautilus is, and this is really important to get, is we were carrying on making 800s and 801s in particular when we were making Nautilus. So Nautilus was never tasked with being something that we were going to produce in quantity. I mean, we don't produce it in quantity, typically 20 to 25 pairs a year, right? So in the last 10 years, if you just do your maths, you're talking about 250 odd pairs. Right. You know, in that last 10 years, we've made, I'm going to guess, 80 to 90,000 800 series loudspeakers. Wow. You know, I mean, in a good year, it can make, the factory can make 18, 19,000 cabinets. So it's just an order of magnitude different, right? So because Nautilus is fundamentally, you know, almost exclusively by hand in terms of its assembly, its process, its finish and everything, it kind of doesn't matter, you know, it can take, and it does take, a hell of a long time to put one together and paint it and polish it and construct it, because we know we're going to be making a ton of them, and that's not the intent. It's for the particular consumer who wants it. If we went about making an 801 or an 800 the same way as we make a Nautilus, we really struggle, because that's not what we want to do. We want to sell, you know, 800s and 800s in quantity. That's the difference. Well,
yeah. I tell everybody I love my hobby, but I do have a business.
Well, there's that as well. But you know what I mean? I suppose what I'm trying to say is in lots of ways the constraints come off if you aren't thinking about how many of these things do I have to make? How long is it going to take me to make each one?
It's definitely a statement.
And also, it's down to like companion choices as well. You know, like, you know it. Everybody who knows it has listened to it. Nautilus is difficult to set up. Nautilus is fussy about the rooms that it goes into. It requires 8 channels of amplification. You know, it's like, you're going down a very committed road. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a great road to go down, but if you want a pair of Nautilus, you have to make a bunch of choices about how that thing's going to behave in your room, because you put it in a room and don't think about it, you're likely going to create some issues. Whereas an 800, as spectacular as it is a bunch easier in lots of ways to get going and to live with, and of course it can scale and do other things as well.
Yep. Well, I have we have had a lot of fondness here all the way through the series, 600, 700, and 800. And so I don't know if you got anything you can tease us with. You got anything that might be coming down the road from you guys? I know you just came out with new 600s and 700s, so it's kind of unfair, but that's what everybody always wants to know. What's new?
Well, of course, I mean, you'd be disappointed if I said to you that we weren't working on new stuff. I mean, equally, I'm not going to give you details because, that's not fair on the team, for one thing.
Agreed.
What I will say is, time being where it is, you'd be very disappointed if we weren't working on a new generation of 800 series, because of course it's approaching 5 years. In fact, it is 5 years since we launched the current range. So it would be reasonable to expect a new generation of 800 series sometime in the forthcoming few years. But I can't give you a precise timeline.
I always love asking that question, and I always get about that answer.
Well, I mean, what I will say, and the good thing about it. Okay, let's talk about the good things. I mean, I've clearly been hearing things, working on things, hearing stuff with the teams.
Right.
There's always more to come. Like I said before, what we're driven by is almost like a kind of semi-obsessive desire to kind of to move the game on. And the great news from the evidence that I've heard so far is that's what we can achieve. And I'm very excited, and I'm sure we all will be when we do actually get to that point when we're pushing new products out to market, to hear the reaction, to see the kind of reaction of guys like you and your customers and the independent critical press and whatever else, because it's never done, right? I don't think there's any such thing as the perfect loudspeaker. There are some very good ones, but I don't think there's a perfect one. And maybe that's just as well, because if there was a perfect loudspeaker, then guys like me would be out of a job. So we can always move on, and we can always do new things and learn new things. And then the rush, if you like, is like doing that and then applying them to the product, and then, like I say, seeing the reaction, both the internal reaction from yourselves and then the reaction from the rest of the world.
That's the thing that I look at, is basically trying to recreate real life. The dynamics that are in real life is an impossibility, or at least at this point. I've said this can't happen or that can't happen so many times in this business, and then I've had to stick my foot in my mouth for saying it. It's kind of like, well, this system can't be sounding any better, and then all of a sudden you do a few things and it sounds better.
And you find it, right? Yeah.
Yes. So kind of like what you guys do is you take a lot of little things and put them together to make that big difference when you come out with a new product. And we as a system are, and that's one of the reasons why we like working very consistently with the companies that we work with, because it allows us to learn more about how to get more out of that gear. And it's not just the gear itself, it's our knowledge of how we work with it and how it fits and works together with other things and what helps them improve.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that's the good way to look at it as well. I mean, like I said to you earlier on, from the engineering development point of view, right? The more you understand about how these things work, the easier in theory it becomes to work on the next one, because you've got a good baseline. And that's the same, fundamentally in terms of putting something into a room. Again, were you to do the work and track the development of 800 series, you'd note that fundamentally they pretty much all work the same way. Certainly over the course of the last few years, there's a ported low frequency enclosure, there's a separated head system, and then there's a tweeter on top. And that's, going way back to like the original one, pretty much there was a sealed one, but pretty much that's kind of how it's been. And as a result, they have a reasonably predictable model for behavior. If we came up with a new 800 and it was, I don't know, dual opposed base drive units actively driven in a kind of sealed enclosure, and then it was a thin pencil sitting on top. We could call it an 800 series, but you'd be looking at it and going, "What's that?" And so there's a predictability in that sense. It's a little bit. Here's my cowboy thing. It's a little bit like Porsche with the 911. When the 9 comes out, you have like an expectation of what a 911 will be, and you know the trick then is just to make it a better 911. And I think we're a bit like that with
doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're a little bit like that with 800s.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. So y'all use a diamond tweeter. And so tell us a little bit about why that is, and you know what makes it so special.
Okay, so what we discovered some time ago was that if you pushed away the moment of first breakup or distress modes, whatever you want to call it, on a cone beyond the audible limit, if you raised it beyond the audible threshold point, you started to get more beneficial behavior within the audible range. So I'll characterize what I mean. If you accept that like the upper frequency limit's 20 kilohertz, 20,000 cycles a second, right? And then you just designed a system to hit that tolerance point and no more, that threshold point, pardon me, and no more. Then as the system starts to reach those upward frequencies, it's starting to get close to its limitations. It's starting to get stressed. And that will inevitably affect its behavior. That will effectively mean it's no longer doing its job without any change in shape or behavior. And you can hear that. Then you can hear the tweeters starting to get stressed. So we worked out some time ago with, first off, with aluminium domes, that, you know, we could get them to about 30 kilohertz as opposed to 20. And that was beneficial and audible, and you could hear it. So the challenge ever since was to try to see what could be done to push those threshold points further up. These days, on a 600 series model, you have the double dome aluminium tweeter. So that's it's a 30 micron primary dome, and then the back of it, or periphery of it, is reinforced around the edge with a second dome, which is actually slightly thicker. It's 50 micron, and then the center portion of it's cut away. So you're not adding any kind of mass to the center of the dome, and obviously mass isn't good because it would be, you know, it have an impact on sensitivity, but you're stiffening up around the periphery because you've got the net effect of the 30 micron and the 50 micron. So at the periphery of the dome, it's braced a bit more, and that gives us 38 kilohertz breakup, which we argue is audible. On a 700 series, we take broadly the same principle, but we just improve the material processes. So the main dome is covered with a kind of carbon, which is physically deposited as PVD, physical vapor deposition. And then the aluminium secondary portion is replaced by a pure carbon ring. So it's a 30 micron carbon brace dome with a 300 micron carbon ring around the edge, and that gives us 47 kilohertz. And again, we'd argue that that's audible. And I'll explain what I mean by that. You can't hear 47 kilohertz. What you can hear is the dome behaving better in the audible range up to 20 kilohertz, just to be clear.
Yep. I've always been a big believer in everything that I do, basically, is that if, you know, the drivers are relaxed, the amplifier is relaxed, everything in the system is relaxed and not working hard, it's always going to be a better sounding system with less noise.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So yeah, avoiding distress modes or stress mode in the system is the way to. So in the diamond dome, it's the most extreme application of the lot. So as you can imagine, aluminium to carbon stiffened aluminium, obviously you're going through increasingly stiff materials. Now the most stiff material available is diamond, and as a result, we get spectacular performance out of it. Now it's very complex to make, to say the least. It's done for us in the UK by a company called Element 6. They're part and parcel of the De Beers Group, the De Beers Diamond Company. And they're basically artificially growing real diamonds. So they take a very high pressure superheated chamber, and then they inject a gaseous cloud of carbon particles into the top of the chamber, and then progressively and steadily reduce the temperature and the pressure. And the carbon particles begin to descend, and as they descend, they form essentially like a membrane, a thin frost or a membrane over the top of a former, which is the shape of the dome. And that eventually cools off to be 40 micron thin, 40 micron is not thick, 40 micron thin layer of artificially grown diamond. What we do then is acid erode away the former to just leave us with the shape of the dome itself, and the edge geometry has to be cut by laser to create the perfectly round dome shape. If you then look at it it kind of actually looks a little bit like carbon still, even though it's at that point artificially grown diamond. So to kind of make it more uniform in terms of its look, it gets a top coat of platinum over the top, and that's what gives it that slightly more diamond looking color. Fundamentally, it's a diamond thing. It's phenomenally stiff. I mean, unbelievably stiff. Like I say, 72 kilohertz. And again, you can hear it in the resolution. It's very, very fragile because it's so stiff. I mean, obviously, if you touch an aluminium dome, it will bend. If you touch a diamond dome, it just explodes.
I've heard.
So don't do that. So
I don't intend to.
yeah, so that's why we developed the tweeter grill mesh that we now have in place to protect it. And as a result of having developed that, well, our tweeter replacement rate's fallen through the floor. It's an immensely more durable system now, which we're very pleased with. But yeah, so that's the diamond dome. It what you hear is I mean, and you can do it. I mean, again, we do a little walk-up demonstration all the time, which I'd urge you guys to do, where you just take a 606 and then you play a 706. So what you are then allowing the customer to hear is like the difference between a carbon dome tweeter and an aluminium double dome tweeter, but still fundamentally the configurations of the two are the same. And then you go from that 706 to a 705, and then the drive units are basically the exact same, but now you've gone from a tweeter in a baffle to a tweeter and a tweeter on top configuration. And then you go from a 705 to an 805, and at that point, of course, you're allowing the customer to hear the difference between tweeter on top with carbon dome and tweeter on top with diamond dome. And all the way through, there's a step up. All the way through, you can hear it really clear, just with the same cut each time as part and parcel of the demo. But the diamond dome just reveals, it just peels the layers away, and just reveals so much more than even our other domes.
It is amazing when you reduce that noise that stress causes. Shall we say how much more? I don't know. Even it's more dynamic but easier on your head.
Well, again, the point about all of it, like we said earlier on when we were talking about cabinet designs, is we need our systems to shut up and get out of the way. That's the point, right? The performer is the key to this. The music is the key to this. So what we need, the cabinets, mechanically and acoustically, the assemblies, the enclosures, the housings, and the cones to all do is just shut the hell up and not do anything other than what they are supposed to do. And so that's the kind of, I suppose, if you wanted to summarize the essence, you asked a little earlier on about the essence of loudspeaker design in fundamentals. It's about the reduction of the unwanted noise in particular, in the aim of kind of delivering the music as it should be.
Yep, that's again very, very, very well said. So we're about done, but I want to get, I know y'all have a new, well, not new, but a Formation series of products for streaming that are powered and those types of things. Can you give us kind of a brief idea where that is, and then we're going to get into some questions. Yeah,
for sure. So look, Formation is, it's a long-standing project, right? I mean, we, as you guys will know, we started doing wireless products back in the 2011, 2012, first with the Zeppelin Air,
right?
Then a few models that followed. We never at that time attempted to make a stereo pair. And that was because AirPlay partially didn't actually allow it in those days. I mean, in modern generations of AirPlay do, but in those days it wasn't something that was feasible. But also because the system wasn't transparent enough in terms of its behavior. It didn't carry the resolution necessary to create true stereo in a way that we felt was, commensurate with the brand, really. So we initiated the project that would eventually become Formation Products in 2013. And the task was trying to find a way to deliver all of the kind of consumer benefits and user friendliness of an active product and a wireless product, something that was compatible with mobile devices and streaming services, but that also sounded like a Bowers Wilkins product in the stereo space. That was the key, in the stereo space. And the reason for doing that's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of consumers growing up now who have no idea what CDs even are, or if they do, they just don't have any relevance. They've lived in a world of streamed audio. They've lived in a world of on-demand music, like we were talking about, and they don't think in terms of requiring, you know, a separated amplifier and a separated set of cables and all that sort of stuff. To them, the music exists on, you know, reaching for it, that device, right? And it goes from that device to another component in the home, and that's it. It's the point source relationship. So we said, well, you know, we clearly still want to be relevant to those consumers. Yeah. We still really want to be around in 15 years' time. If we don't do this, you know, we risk, you know, gradually kind of going the way of the arc, you know. So let's investigate a way to do it, but let's investigate a way to do it to our standards. So the next couple of years were not about transducer design or any of those other things, because we knew we were going to use proven ingredients from existing loudspeakers. What they were about was trying to find a platform, a wireless platform that could, we felt, meet the needs of our acoustic performance in terms of, you know, transparency. And it's amazing how many systems don't. And again, I'm not the kind of person who's going to be naming names or dealing with specifics, because that's not appropriate. But we found some wireless platforms where, you know, there was approaching like 7 milliseconds of delay left to right in the pairing. And that's really clearly audible. I mean, that's like a considerable offset distance between one speaker and another acoustically. Not only that, but in some cases, the systems were actually reacquiring, beaconing, and drifting by as much as 7 milliseconds, which essentially means in the real world, each speaker is moving forwards and backwards to each other acoustically by a matter of several feet. Depending, you know, you're not actually seeing them doing that, but acoustically in terms of the time. So that just isn't going to work, right? We know there's no way we could do that. I mean, what happens is the end result, if you do ever do that, with that is you'll hear the soundstage or the image within the soundstage kind of appear to be drifting, because essentially it's moving relative to the acoustic position of the speaker, and it's kind of doing that. And it's like, that's not what we wanted to do. We want it locked. So, you know, we looked at other off-the-shelf solutions from several key providers, and there are some much better ones than that, by the way. There are some really seriously good ones out there, just to be clear. But in the end, we decided that we wanted to develop it ourselves, because that's the kind of idiots that we are. So obsessives that we are. So we can do it better. So we developed our own proprietary system. So the end game, and obviously this was working alongside our colleagues at Eva Automation at the time, you know, to kind of come up with the platform and everything that went with it, is what we have now, which is Formation. It has category defined and category leading levels of wireless synchronization between speakers in rooms. So it's 1 microsecond. And if you guys aren't good on milliseconds and microseconds, milliseconds is thousandths of a second. Synchronization. Our system is accurate to 1 millionth of a second.
It's amazing,
which is pretty good. I mean, you can measure it, but you're unlikely to be able to hear it. And what it fundamentally means is, for most people, most of the time, the system is as good as a wired system from the point of view of the sync left to right. Now, armed with that platform, that then meant we could kind of push boundaries and do new things. From a performance point of view, because we were confident that it would kind of meet the needs. So the Duo is the kind of the apex point of that thinking. It was like a case of, well, let's make a product that people who knew the brand and knew how we thought would recognize as a Bowers and Wilkins. You know, so it's got deliberate kind of design references, choices, and cues in its look. In its thinking, like the tweeter on top, the curved cabinet, all those kind of things. And at the same time, let's make it overtly modern and different, so that it doesn't just get confused with another passive loudspeaker. So that's why it has
the design's pretty unique.
Yeah, and then absolutely, obviously, the key part about it is you know, just design it as a completely holistic system. So it's got, you know, the amps on board, the DAC on board, the DSP on board, the EQ on board, the power supply on board. Everything's on board. You know, you can take premium performance audio with a cable system and an amp and all the rest of it, and if you know what you're doing, you can have that system up and running in 15-20 minutes, and it's going to sound good, right? And you can take a pair of Duo out of the box and plug them up, and if you know what you're doing, you can be up and running in about 2 minutes.
Right.
and they sound good. They sound good. I'm not going to say that a Duo sounds better than, you know, the very best that you can achieve with a really good passive amp and a pair of 805s and all the rest of it. But for a lot of people, a lot of the time, it literally rocks. It's a great sounding speaker.
Yep. It's amazing what DSP can do too, and having separate amps for separate drivers and that kind of thing, and to be able to kind of be able to, how should I say, manipulate the drivers a little bit in the cabinet it's in to be able to help it do more.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know if you've ever looked inside one, but it's a double shaft magnet. It's like, like a regular cone has a single magnet. This has like two. Like it's a big system like that because it's a sealed enclosure. It's non-ported, so you can get a lot of output from the cone because you're asking the cone to play quite low down in frequency, but then we're controlling that using the dynamic EQ in the DSP to make sure that the cone never inverts or bottoms, whatever it might be. And then using that with the double shaft magnet, if you compare the amount of cone excursion that you get on a Formation Duo to the amount of cone excursion you get on an equivalent sized 705, the Duo is like, because it's got all this magnet kind of holding the cone in and making sure that things don't go wrong. So they go low, they go properly low. We can get them down decent output at like 20, 28, 26 hertz. They can go down.
Pretty amazing.
Which for what they are is phenomenal. So it's a fun thing. But look, the summary point about Formation is not to say that it was intended at any point to be, a goodbye to the passive loudspeaker world. We fully recognize that for a certain customer, with a certain kind of time invested in and kind of interest in passive, they don't want to change. They have what they have. It's more a case saying what we needed to have was a product that could, appeal to that younger generation consumer, or appeal to the consumer who had perhaps discovered us through a product such as the Zeppelin and then needed something else to buy, And
needless to say, the Zeppelin's been one exceptionally well-performing product for you. And it's there's a couple other companies out there, we won't call them by name, but have kind of done fairly well with wireless streaming products. And y'all are given a step up, in sound quality and that kind of thing. It's available to them to be able to do some of the same things those slightly less lower end products are doing. So,
I think you can also get to a situation, can't you, where you've got like a mixed model in your household. Maybe you've got in certain rooms, in certain spaces, you've got wireless audio systems, and then maybe in your primary room, whether it's what you call it, your theater room or your family room, whatever it might be, you've got your HiFi, or your theater or HiFi, so, and that's maybe built to a more traditional model, and that's fine. I think no one expects every single person to have a 6 foot tall pair of loudspeakers on cables in every room in their home. What we're trying to say is we can now service your requirements for high quality Bowers Wilkins sound anywhere in your home, or back on something we were talking about a little bit earlier, take it with you as well, which is why we do headphones and why we do mobile audio systems in cars, and in Europe why we do audio for TV, because we want ideally more people to have more opportunity to get access to the way we try and do things. It doesn't mean to say you have to have it, but if you value what an 800 or a 700 or a 600 can do for you, you're probably going to value what one of these products would do as well. Yep.
I think, same culture is putting it together. So you'll find, there's a lot of, how should I say, commonness amongst the products and that kind of thing because of that culture.
Yeah,
so,
I think that's very good.
Yep. So we have a headphone bar here at the store where we have about 16 sets of headphones and that kind of thing. And so we carry the PX7, PX5s and that kind of thing in there and really enjoy them. I don't think we're going to get too deep. I don't want to get too long with everybody here, nor yourself, because I know you're a busy guy. And so I wanted to try and get a few questions answered here if we could. So I knew this was going to come up. Ralph Terrell says, what do you see for the future since being acquired by Sound United?
I think it's really exciting. The guys are, they're an established and very professional organization with a substantial, business already out there. They're there to provide us with resource to grow. They're not there to kind of, cut the company off at its knees. They wouldn't have acquired Bowers Wilkins if that's what their intention was. They want to continue to scale and develop in their premium audio category. Don't forget, of course, they own Class A. I think Denon and Marantz in particular also have lots of obviously, opportunities and fits to products and spaces that can work alongside what we do. So far, I think nothing but positive. I mean, it's been a turbulent year for Bowers Wilkins, let's be honest, in terms of what's
Yes.
been happening for us. We're very pleased and proud of the products we've been putting out at the same time. I think hopefully most people would agree that we've probably got a little bit of our identity back, and our riding through the storms of COVID and everything else haven't exactly helped matters, but we're feeling solid and stable, and we've had a great, believe it or not, we've had a great 6 months in terms of sales performance, which is great testament to all my colleagues in the sales departments the world over. So it's a good time to kind of move on to the next step. And I think the next step is, well, let's see what happens when we put some investment in. Let's see what happens when we try and lift the game again. So I think at the moment we're all excited. I mean, nothing's changing right now in terms of existing in-flight product development plans. I'm not going to tell you what they are. But nothing's changing on that front, and we're just talking, having serious conversations all the time about investment, and that seems to be the commonly shared word coming from the guys. So I think the great thing about it from our perspective, as I said at the start, the difference between us and certain other brands is, clearly you have to kind of understand the way we do things, because we're well aware we are unusual, and from my perception so far of everybody I've met from Sound United, they get us, they get how we think, and they want very much for us to kind of help contribute to their existing and, as I said, very successful business. So
I'm actually excited about it. I carry Marantz here and B&W. I like the guys at Sound United, and I actually think it's a really, really great space for y'all to be in. So
well, exactly. Like I say, I mean, it's I've been asked the question a few times recently, and all I'd say is, like, look at Marantz, look at Denon. It's not like these guys are exactly tanking since the since the D&M acquisition a few years ago. So I think that the evidence that was in front of us is clear. There's opportunity here, and as you said quite rightly, I think there's a really strong portfolio fit across several different categories of Sound United product with or existing Sound United, because of course we are Sound United now.
Yep.
But with what we do.
Well, they've got a very strong stable of brands, and adding you to it is I think great for both companies.
Yeah.
So Lee Brammer, he says, I am fortunate enough to own a pair of 603 S2s. Would there be any reason to upgrade to 704s? Is there little to gain for the trouble, cost, repercussions on power?
I think if you are enjoying your 603s, I would recommend that you stay with your 603s. The 704 is a better speaker in certain regards, particularly transparency, because of its decoupled mid-range, and because it's improved crossover componentry, and it will also resolve a bit more because of its improved high frequency. It's the carbon dome, but it doesn't have the scale of a 603. A 603 has a fun sense of horsepower to it because it's a 6.5-inch system.
Yep.
If you were going to upgrade and you have that itch, I would say save a bit more and go for either 703, which is obviously fundamentally the same form factor as a 603 that you've got. What I'd really urge you to try is 702. I think, and we've just discussed it earlier on, if you want to really go to 700 series and make the most of what it can do, that's the golden ticket. Yep.
It's also a speaker that's pretty friendly on most power levels and that kind of thing. So
as we said earlier on, and I can't agree with you more. It's not like it's you have to revolutionize, rip out the rest of your system necessarily to feel the benefit. But yeah, I mean, I would say that's the one thing. 704 it's a 5-inch system. It's a great speaker. It's a beautiful speaker, but it's a 5-inch system. And if you're enjoying what 603 does, and it sounds like you are, then you're going to find 704, whilst it does some things better, probably doesn't have the scale.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for that answer. I've got Lee, thank you very much for your question. Mr. David Solomon, hey, buddy.
Hello.
He says, what's your new favorite music? Seems to always be interesting. Thanks for the Black Pumas.
Mr. David Solomon. Oh, my word.
He lives here in Atlanta with me.
Yeah, I know. I talk with him all the time. What have I been listening to recently? Actually, you know what? Okay, so this is completely different, and it's no way different or interesting, but it's just like I almost feel like it's just a triumph against all of the odds. The new AC/DC album came out the other day. Have you heard that?
No.
Yeah, and like they had like a ton of problems with like like at one point Brian was nearly certified deaf and was told to stop touring. If he toured one more time, he'd literally go deaf. And then like everything happened with some of the other members of the band, Malcolm in particular. And then like everybody thought that was the end of AC/DC, and then they just come out with a new album and it rocks. It's really good. So it's not new music. It's just a new piece of music from an established band. But I played that the other day and I couldn't help but smile, even though you know what it sounds like. It sounds like an AC/DC album, which means it sounds. But
that's what I've heard people say about it, that it actually really sounds like AC/DC. So that's pretty awesome.
But if you're in the mood for that, there is nothing better. This is fun. Actually, what I've been discovering and playing a ton of recently is just because I've had more time, because I've been at home a bit more. We're working from home currently. We're in lockdown again in the UK.
Wow.
Is kind of pulling out some old vinyl. So I spent a kind of therapeutic hour, or try and spend a therapeutic hour listening to records every couple of days, just to kind of reset a little bit. So yeah, wow. The Jam most recently as well. There you go. That's retro for you.
Okay.
So it's still not new. David, I'll have to send you some new stuff. I do have some new stuff as well, but it's late and my brain's not working so well. So those are the two that kind of popped in my head recently that I've been listening to.
Well, that's awesome. David, thank you very much for the question. Guys, we're going to close up here unless there's any other questions that come in. Andy, I just want to thank you so much for your time. And I want to apologize to everybody out there for a little bit of our technical difficulties. This is a new streaming service that we're using to do these, trying to improve them and make them better. And so anyway, I apologize for a little bobble here or there. But if y'all will, please like and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you don't mind going to HiFi Bios and signing up for our newsletter. Andy, I'm so excited about what the future is going to hold for y'all. And that means for me as well. So again, just cannot thank you enough for your time and your insight. I knew this would be interesting, and I appreciate it so much.
That's a pleasure. I think it seemed to breeze by. So yeah, great talking to you. Great talking to you. Best of luck for the rest of the day. It's like oh wow, okay, well we have been here for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 10:09 in the evening here in the UK. So I am going to crack open a beer and put my feet up now. That's my day.
Awesome. I'm not quite there yet. I got work to do, but listen, you enjoy your beer, and you guys, this has been Alan Jones with HiFi Buys and HiFi Chats with Andy Kerr, who is Director of Product Marketing and Communications at Bowers Wilkins. Thank you so much for everybody joining us. And again, thank you, Andy.
You're welcome. Take care, guys.
You too.